I'm afraid to say to an American audience that America is going to lose this war. In recent days, I was talking to my friend Simon Hunt, who lives in Dubai, and his working assumption is that this is going to last until September. I think it probably will last that long. It'll last as long as it takes for the Gulf Cooperation Council members to tell America goodbye. That's as long as it'll take. When they do that, then I think things will get better. Now, they're not stopping all the oil, because the other thing, which, in terms of geopolitics is actually very, very serious, is Iran is letting tankers through who have paid for their oil in Chinese yuan. I mean, it started by allowing Chinese and Russian shipping through Hormuz. Then it was Bangladesh. But basically what they're now saying, as I understand it, is that if you have paid in yuan for your oil, then we will let you go through. In other words, Satan's currency, the dollar, is not acceptable. And if you've paid in dollars, you'll get sunk. This actually has huge ramifications for the dollar. It's the end of the petrocurrency, quite simple. The way in which the dollar has become, if you like, the trade settlement currency for virtually everything, that basis has basically been knocked out from under it. It's a very bad situation for the West. It really is. It's not just oil either. I mean, there are fuel bunkers tied up in the Gulf, which is needed by shipping. Not only that, but of course, with the petrochemical cracking process, you end up with urea, you end up with sulfur, you end up with even helium. All these vital components, which are really needed at this moment. I mean, if you look at phosphates, for example, and also, the sort of, if you like, the stuff, phosphates and things like that, which you need for agriculture. This is the growing season. We need it now. And roughly a third of the world's production of it effectively has been shut off. What's that going to do to food prices later on this year? Intensive farming methods. I just had the stool knocked out from under them. I've been reading about helium today. A few people have started commenting about that. It's needed for all sorts of very, very important, vital things. And the problem with helium is that it sort of disappears very, very quickly, being the second lightest gas of the lot. Do you need it for medical applications and so on and so forth? You need it for, these sort of super chip manufacturing processes. So, this is not just a question of oil. On the gas side, that's being accelerated after the strike on a Persian gas field today. And I think it's sort of almost carte blanche for Iran to attack other oil and gas installations. Whether they will do or not, I don't know. We will see. They are running this war in a very measured way, which is something which I don't think the White House really understood was going to happen. The whole thing is bizarre. Trump was quoted, the other day he was on television saying that nobody expected them to close off Hormuz. What? This is lunacy, complete lunacy. I think this is going to turn out to be the worst decision that any US president has made in the history of the United States. And, of course, everybody's been talking about the midterms it's November, I think, isn't it, Christian? Everybody's talking about the midterms and how, this has got to be a successful campaign that's going to bolster his numbers. And, this has backfired very, very badly. It really has. There are also huge, great economic problems coming from this. I mean, apart from shortages of oil, gas, fertilizers, and all the rest of it. This is going to drive up prices very, very strongly in the second half of this year. Of that, I have no doubt. If someone told me that, or asked whether I thought that inflation would be as high as 20% at the end of this year, I have no idea. But I would not be surprised. Let's put it that way. Could even be more. We are, after all, Christian, seeing the end of the fiat currency system. And what that means is that there are either two alternatives. Either the fiat currencies lose all their purchasing power, or they stop the rot and they attach it to gold. I can see no possibility of how the dollar can be attached to gold. For a start, nobody believes the gold reserves of 8,130 odd tons. That would have to be made, if you like, credible. And not only that, but we do know that there is a problem, let's put it this way, in the gold being stored on earmarked basis by the New York Fed for foreign governments. We know this because Germany had this ridiculous situation where they wanted to withdraw some of their gold. There were obviously negotiations behind the scenes before it even became public. What did we end up with? They could take out 300 tons over 7 years. What? It's quite clear. The gold isn't there. So that's the first thing they would have to, they'd have to disprove my allegation that the gold is not there. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that they would have to cut public spending right back and run a real budget surplus with a long-term objective of reducing government's involvement in the underlying economy. Chances of that? Zero. Absolute zero. So in other words, unless we get this big turnaround, of the two alternatives, the currency either attaches itself to gold or it goes to zero, it goes to zero. And I think the point about this war against Iran is that the timescale has been foreshortened very, very considerably. Could be a year or two, that's all. And the other interesting thing, and this is why this yuan situation is so important, we're just seeing the death of the petrodollar. That's now dead as a result of this, killed off by America, for goodness sake, replaced by the yuan. And the yuan is already prepared for this, with Shanghai Gold Exchange faults in Hong Kong and also Saudi Arabia. And they're also talking, I saw something, whether it's right or not, that they'll probably open one in Iran after this kerfuffle. And you've got CIPS, the Chinese International Payment System, which allows you to exchange currencies without going through the dollar. And that's been working very, very effectively. And you're going to get the whole of the Middle East turning its back on the dollar and using CIPS and using the yuan. I mean, if you look at the quantity of dollars held by foreigners, I mean, on US Treasury's own tick figures, there's something like 44 trillion last time I looked, of which roughly half is invested in equities, which I have to say is a speculative investment. And as soon as the equity market turns south, what happens to that? It's out. Quite simple. Not only that, but what we are seeing is with higher inflation taking off over this, particularly the second half of this year, you're going to see bond yields rising very significantly. We now got, I understand that you've just crossed the 39 trillion government debt barrier, 39 trillion. I mean, it's unfundable now. It really is. The only way in which can be funded is basically cash for cash. In other words, what the Fed would be doing was it would be increasing, it would be pumping out cash and pumping up bank reserves to put currency into the economy. And it would be financing it off short-term USD Treasury debt, cash for cash. It's called money printing. And this is going to be huge. Because as you get higher interest rates, all the zombie companies fall over. The banking system, in part, gets into real difficulties, particularly where they've funded private equity, if you like, and shadow banking, which is already going sour, as we've seen with the, with various funds, not prepared to meet withdrawals, the sort of private credit funds. So. What more do you want to know? It's all going to fall over. And the foreigners are going to try and get the hell out of the dollar, and the dollar will go down. And will it last 2 years? I mean, it's interesting. If you look at what happened in the First World War years in Germany, when the Reichsmark lost all its purchasing power between 1918, get the century right, 1918 and 1923, the similarities, I mean, okay, it's different circumstances and, different triggers and all the rest of it, but the circumstances are so similar in terms of the politics. It's the politics that will run the currency into the ground, not economics. Even though this, the macroeconomic analysis is faulted and all the rest of it, it is actually a non-science. Replaced classical economics, which had a better idea. When you look at Germany in 1918 to 1923, the economists in those days had a better grasp of economics than the economists today. We just look at people like Paul Krugman and Stiglitz, I think, in an earlier time, reckoned that Venezuela, and this was under Chavez, should stimulate its economy. He thought it was a good policy. Well, we know what's happened there. The currency has gone into hyperinflation. Basically, we know less today how to deal with this situation than they knew in post-First World War Germany. And that should send shivers down your spine. I mean, there's no way they can stop the collapse of these fiat currencies. They're coming to the end. And it's going to be a period. I mean, we had no idea on timing. We could have sort of penciled in, well, it probably takes anything between 3 and 5 years. It's now beginning to look like 2 years, possibly. And then if we're lucky, it could happen overnight, theoretically. But I think that's unlikely. I hope it's unlikely.